Welcome to another video. This is David, the real Met White. Salutations to you all. I hope you enjoyed this because today we're going to be talking about the Sacred Heart. And we're going to be answering the question whether it is Nestorian or not. So this is something that has been talked about in some spheres, Discord, Twitter, Facebook perhaps, about whether Sacred Heart is a good practice, an Orthodox practice. It is a Western tradition. There are some very small amounts of Antiochian Western Rite parishes in Orthodoxy that does the Sacred Heart prayers, but this is not an attack on Western theological culture. This is not merely an attack on the West does it, therefore it's a bad thing. No, we're going to be. This is a video that is full on analyzing the Sacred Heart, and what's really important, what I really want to make key here, is that theology and spirituality, prayer life, right? These are all very much connected and they are in a union together. A good theologian is the one that prays. So theology, if it takes a wrong direction, the spirituality is also going to be taking a wrong direction, is something that I want to signify. And I hope you all keep this in mind as we go on into this video, because that's the main critique that we're going to be making. And then we're going to be looking at the end of the video, we're going to be trying to find the answer of, is it Nestorian? Is it Nestorianizing? Does it contain an Orthodox Christology, or is it completely off the goof, right? Off the goop. I can't speak today. So we're going to be looking at what is exactly the Sacred Heart. If someone asks this question, right, what really is this Sacred Heart? It's a symbol for God's boundless and passionate love. So this seems really beautiful, right? This seems to capture a lot of what Sacred Heart tries to show to people. And some people might come up and say, well, it says symbol, so this doesn't really seem like a real thing. It just seems like a merely allegorical, symbolical thing. But we're going to be looking further on into this video that it's not just a mere symbol, but it is connected with reality. So symbolism and realism, these are not contradictory things. These can be together. Sometimes something can be purely symbolic. Sometimes something can be purely real. But sometimes something can be purely real, not purely, but real and symbolic. And I think Sacred Heart fits under this category, because if it was purely symbolic, we will not have prayers dedicated to it. I'm not going to read the Sacred Heart prayers. I don't want to read it. And if I want to be honest, I don't even want to touch it with a pole or anything. I'm sorry, but you can read the prayers for yourself. I mean, the prayers are to his heart. So some prayers are dedicated purely to Jesus' heart. Some of them is dedicated to him and his heart, right? So you can, as I said, you can look up the prayers for yourself if you think I found the worst prayers, right? You can feel free to look up yourself, right? Shouldn't be a big deal. If you look at the history of the Sacred Heart, I should stop saying by the way. It probably annoys people. But anyways, if you look at the history of the Sacred Heart worship, the first thing I want to note is that you can't find this in the pre-schism church. This does not exist in the pre-schism church. The Sacred Heart worship, this does not at all exist in the pre-schism church. You won't find it either in the West or in the East. I think for a very good reason. Local devotions were a thing until the 17th century. So post-schism, you start to see local orders trying to do the Sacred Heart prayers. So there's local devotions, but really it's Margaret Mary Alacoque, who's the main face of Sacred Heart, who pushes it from it being merely a local devotion to it being an ecumenical, universal devotion that is accepted in the Catholic Church today. So who is Margaret Mary Alacoque? And I don't really like doing this because I remember last time people talked about this person, huge disputes happened on Twitter and in online sphere. So I don't like doing this. This is not a preferred venue of mine. My preferred venue is theology, which we will be getting to really soon. But I think it's important for us to learn about her life. And if you think that I've done a disservice regarding to her life, feel free to look up Wikipedia. Feel free to make your own research and come to the conclusions of your own. Okay, so if you think I'm lying, so be it. You're free to make your own judgment and research. But here's a brief history of her. So she's a nun. She saw a vision of Christ in 1675. Allegedly, Christ said to her, "Behold, the heart that has so loved men. Instead of gratitude, I receive from the greater part only ingratitude." She swapped hearts with Christ, so this is something that I want to signify. This, I think, proves that this is not merely symbolic. Is the heart swap merely symbolic? I mean, if this whole story is merely symbolic and didn't really happen, then why is it a devotion? It seems like that will make it a myth, right? So myths are purely symbolic, that are divorced from reality. But Christianity is not a myth-based religion. I think this is very important to signify. And then, this is the crazy part, is that she did bloodletting in 1681 with the permission of a superior. She carved her breast area with Jesus' name multiple times, and she even burned her chest with fire when she failed the carving. So, again, I don't like talking about this. This caused a lot of people to go up in arms. I think it's very disgusting. I personally, if you ask me, I don't see myself ever being fine with this devotion. If it has a history like that, maybe there's something I don't see. But a lot of the sources, my good friend Snek, who knows French, took from this book. I can't read the book name. I'm not good at reading French. But this is a book about her. And if you're someone that knows French, you can look pages 166, 167, 168. You can look at those pages, and then you can look at the information about her. So this is not made up. There are people that document this, right? So now let's get to the real part of the video, the favorite part of mine. What are the Christological problems? Is there really a Christological problem? Now, let's go back to the 5th century, to the Council of Ephesus, and to the Nestorian dispute. So since we're going to be looking at whether it's Nestorianism, we're going to be looking at the Nestorian dispute itself. So it breaks the 8th anathema of St. Cyril because it introduces an additional doxology. So there are now 2 distinct doxologies and venerations of Christ. There's a veneration to Christ himself, and there's a veneration of Christ to his heart, right? So these are 2 distinct doxologies. So let's go ahead and look at the anathema and St. Cyril's explanation of the 8th anathema. I will read the anathema itself. If anyone shall dare to say that the assumed man ought to be worshipped along with God the Word, and co-glorified and called God as if he were one alongside another, and does not rather worship the Emmanuel with a single veneration, and render him a single doxology since the Word became flesh, let him be anathema. Right? So the key words are him, single veneration, single doxology. Now, how did this anathema even come to place? So if you read St. Cyril and the Christological Controversy by Father John Alacoque, and this is in that book. But one thing that drove this is that the kind of idea is that Nestorius kind of gave this idea that Christ should have a specific veneration to his humanity and a specific veneration to his divinity, because the 2 natures are, he will say that they're in a union, but these 2 natures should be treated in a different way. So one thing that he says, and this is testified in the Council of Ephesus, and this is something that, let us see, Akakios of Melitene and Theodotus of Ankara, these both give a formal testimony in the council. This is something that Nestorius says. I cannot describe as God an infant of 2 or 3 months. So what does this mean here is that this is a clear example of Nestorius separating Christ's divinity from his humanity. And so we can't venerate and understand Christ as a baby. We have to venerate him in a different way from his divinity. So this is where it comes from. And what St. Cyril is saying is that if you believe Christ is one in person, then you should believe that he's one in veneration. Now, some people think that when we speak of one in veneration, they will say, oh, can you not venerate like relics then? Can you not do it? No, this is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is whether Christ is being venerated or something else is being venerated. Now, I think the Sacred Heart is even worse, because Nestorius, the thing about Nestorius is that he developed a separate, distinct veneration for his human nature. Sacred Heart goes to the next level. It goes deep into the human nature and worships a component of his human nature, which I think is even worse. So it's separating Christ and his humanity from his heart in worship. And I think this is a legitimate, if you look at Christological disputes and their history, especially in the 5th and 6th centuries, you will start to understand why this is actually very, very, very problematic. Monophysites will, for example, have a very good point. If Sacred Heart was a thing in that time, they will constantly attack that, I'm sure. And the worst thing is that they will actually be completely right. And if you think that I'm a Monophysite partisan or something, I have a 4-part video series, I think 4 hours dedicated to refuting the religion. So you can't say that I'm a Monophysite partisan. But again, what I want to get back at, what I want to summarize it as, is that the problem with the Sacred Heart is that it has distinct veneration and worship. And there's a worship dedicated to Christ himself, and there's a worship dedicated to his heart. And again, if you look at this prayers of the Sacred Heart, there are prayers dedicated to his heart, right? And some people go to the next level and dedicate prayers to the Theotokos' heart. I mean, what's going on over here? Are we praying to just their hearts, or are we praying to them as persons? Right? This is a question that we need to be asking ourselves, and this is why I will say the Orthodox Church can never accept the Sacred Heart. Again, you might say, "Oh, they're Western Rite." Yeah, but they're very small in number. It's not something that's a dogmatic thing. I mean, it is a dogmatic thing. They are doing something wrong, but that doesn't mean that suddenly we should consider them as heretics, right? A lot of people make that mistake as well. Just because some people make mistakes in veneration, it's a project, so we can't really attack them. So this is not really an anti-Western Rite video, but this is an anti-Sacred Heart video. That's my intention. So if you feel betrayed by that, I'm really sorry. But again, there are real Christological implications of this, and we cannot divorce it from spirituality. And I hope we attempt to understand the problems of Sacred Heart worship. And this is ultimately why I think Sacred Heart worship is Nestorian. It is Nestorianizing the worship. We shall worship Christ as one, as God. We don't worship Christ as man only. We don't worship Christ as God only. We worship Christ as God, fully man, as who he is as a person. That is who we worship Christ. That is how we worship Christ. So I think that will be all for this video. I would like to thank you all for watching this. Hope you learned something new. Again, I don't intend this to be very polemical, even though I know a lot of people will take it to polemical directions. Because last time this happened, a lot of verbal violence happened, let's say, on Twitter and Facebook and a lot of different platforms, even YouTube. So again, I hope you all enjoyed this video. And I'll see you guys in the next one. God bless you all.